Welcome to Biz Wire. I'm Joseph Nordstrom in Beijing. To get a better idea of the fiscal challenges facing the country, China will begin a nationwide audit of government debt this week. The Communist Party leadership is investigating threats to the financial system after a massive expansion in credit. The decision comes amid rising concerns over local governments' repayment capabilities and the lack of transparency on their borrowing methods. It also adds to evidence that Premier Keqiang and his cabinet are willing to accept some short-term pain to rebalance the economy. The South China Morning Post cited a Beijing-based source with knowledge of the government's thinking, who said to a certain extent the new government wants to expose the problems caused by former leaders. Rising local government indebtedness is seen as one of the major risks facing the economy, as defaults could cripple the country's banking system. The country's infrastructure-driven stimulus package to counter the global financial crisis in 2008 led to a lending spree as local governments resorted to heavy borrowing to bankroll the construction of roads, bridges, and railways. The Wall Street Journal reports that sovereign debt issued by the central government stands at about $1.4 trillion, or 16% of GDP, as of the end of last year, which is considered to be quite low. But as the Journal explains, Beijing has kept its balance sheet clean by unloading responsibilities onto local governments and individual ministries, which then borrow to cover their costs. As the Journal points out, though, China does have one big advantage over neighbors like South Korea and Indonesia that were brought to their knees by the Asian financial crisis in 1997, in that almost none of that debt is denominated in foreign currency or owed to foreigners. Andrew Batson of Beijing-based research firm Dragonomics says that means a Greek-style public debt crisis is hard to imagine. An initial review 2 years ago underscores concern about debt expressed by institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, which this month cited risks to the economy from borrowing by local governments and an expansion of non-traditional sources of credit, typified by what's known here as shadow banking. The new leadership has been sending clear messages it is serious about reform when, for example, last month the central bank, the People's Bank of China, engineered a cash squeeze to pressure banks to better manage their operations. The capital crunch was seen as a warning by the leadership against reckless lending habits. Standard Chartered Bank said in a report they had suspected that Premier Li would want to drive significant reforms, but said they underestimated his apparent willingness to make policy choices that would risk putting further downside pressure on the economy. The party's mouthpiece, the People's Daily, said the audit order was an urgent one from the State Council and work could start this week. Since taking office in March, Li has shown his resolve in rectifying past policies in order to minimize financial risks. The South China Morning Post wrote that the order to audit government debt also reflects the new leadership's resolve to maintain a tighter grip on local governments as a way to ensure consistency in policymaking. Rivalry at the local level has been the bane of policymakers, as lower-level government officials tend to inflate growth figures with debt-driven infrastructure work while hiding from Beijing the economic risks. Richard Silk in the Journal says the flip side of all this is that though the Chinese state does have a lot of debt, it also has a lot of assets it could sell to bail itself out. When local governments do run out of land to sell, there are many thousands of state-owned enterprises that could theoretically be privatized, so it's not quite time to panic, at least yet. You're watching Biz Wire on the Blue Ocean Network. We'll be right back with more insight into the big picture of China's economy.